huge thanks to OK Jazzy. They're your go-to for the 2026 World Cup and an incredible retro archive. They've got decades of iconic league classics, from legendary 90s designs to the rarest club heritage kits. Whether it's a high-performance player version or a timeless vintage look, prices start at just £15, 4.5 Trustpilot rating and fast shipping. Use code Chris for 8% off and grab your piece of football history now.
Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another edition of the weekly Tottenham transfer news show. We'll be discussing all of the latest news in terms of transfers, all of the rumours and all of the reports. My name is Chris Cowlin and this evening I'm joined by Gareth McGuinness over in Ireland. We're live on YouTube, live on X and Facebook. Please do get involved. Let us know how you are feeling as a Tottenham Hotspur fan right now. Today is the 17th of August. Spurs have 6 deals over the line so far in this summer transfer window. Of course, it all started very, very early, but we're all hoping for a lot more in the remaining 15 days of this summer transfer window. Gareth, good evening. How are you?
I was just thinking there, Chris, did you say at one point it was the 17th of June? A couple of months ago when we had 6 deals of the line. I'm trying to think back, but it does feel that you've been saying that for quite some time now. But no, look, feeling good. Pre-season's over. And, you know, the excitement around the Premier League now, obviously, this week. It all starts on Friday night. Not far from Tottenham, of course. We are still kicking it off, and then we obviously go to Brentford on Saturday. So, listen, would we like to have more players on after we got done that early business? Of course. But if you look around the league at the minute, there seems to be a lot of clubs in the same position where they're waiting on teams to do business, and it seems like we're gearing up for a crazy last sort of fortnight where you're going to see a lot of players moving. I don't know what deal it's going to be that's going to start the domino effect, but it definitely feels like there's a lot of clubs just waiting for one deal to happen so they can then do their deal, and then of course things will move after that. So patience is probably worn thin with a lot of Spurs fans over the years, but they're probably going to have to be patient for another couple of weeks. I do think that the majority of all these deals around the Premier League are going to happen in the final few days of the window.
Gareth, of course, we are here to talk about transfers, but I just want to ask you first of all, before we talk about transfers on this show, how are you feeling about going into the new season? Do you think that Roberto De Zerbi and the squad are prepared enough? Of course, we've played 7 pre-season friendlies, unbeaten through that period of time in July and August. We've still got a number of players to come back. Roberto De Zerbi has had to really manage and juggle game time for each of these players. Of course, players have come back from the World Cup, etc. A number of players have gone out the door, which we'll talk about shortly. But do you feel like Spurs are prepared enough? And I suppose this is a transfer question as well, because these next 15 days will be very vital to what Tottenham can do this coming season. Because, you know, the podcast I've received, the podcast that I have recorded during the months of July and August, any guest that has come on, particularly the channel regulars, everyone does feel excited and optimistic about the season. But this next 15 days can be very, very vital to league position and what Tottenham can achieve under De Zerbi.
Yeah, and I think some of that positivity, especially that early positivity, especially when we had those announcements of Van Hecke, Tonali and Fernandes, all within quite a short space of time. I know Senesi and Robertson were good signings as well, but when they seen 50 million on Van Hecke, 85 on Fernandes and 100 on Tonali, and the word was we're not finished yet. And whilst that's still what we're hearing, we haven't done anything since. So I think some of that positivity has waned, that's happened quite some time ago. You know, if Spurs had signed Tonali and Fernandes today, everybody would be buzzing going on to Brentford. But because we've got those players on earlier, everybody's looking to know where those attackers are coming from, who are they going to be. There's mixed reviews on how Spurs fans feel about the names that are being linked. So there is a lot of cautious optimism. But I think they really want to see this window finished off in the next couple of weeks with top attacking names coming in the door. And look, pre-season, I never read too much into pre-season, but I think, and this just isn't with Spurs, I think across the league this year, with the World Cup being longer and got on as long as it did, a lot of the top nations got to the end of the World Cup as well. There was the best 4 seeds that got to the semi-final. England, Argentina, France, and Spain. So when you think about all the best players around the world, they've basically had no preseason at all because they've all been on holidays. So it has led to what I've seen. Well, I've been looking at different teams, including obviously ours, but very few teams have got their best players on the pitch together all preseason. So I think it has been a very disjointed preseason for a lot of the top clubs.
Yeah.
And I think you could see in these first few weeks of the season, Chris, is skewed results. You could see a few shock results. I mean, you think about the Community Shield as well. Notoriously, that's a tight game. It's almost like a friendly kind of, 9 times out of 10 goes to penalties or one goal in it. Arsenal wiped the floor with Man City yesterday. Man City looked nowhere near ready to start the new season. You had a new manager coming. They've lost one of their key players in Rodri. So, Man City have had a difficult summer. So, it's going to be very hard to judge how clubs have done in the summer window, just because I think a lot of them haven't been able to really practice too much with their best players available. We've seen a lot of clubs go down the same route as Spurs as well, where they've maybe played 2 games on the same day or 2 games within 24 hours and completely mix the teams up. So it'll be interesting, but I do think with the Premier League starting this weekend, there could be a few shock results. So, if Spurs can start well, it could almost be bonus points at the start of the season, because I think regardless of who you play, it's going to be a difficult game, just because I think the teams that are maybe lower down in the league, the likes, and I don't mean to be, but the likes of Brentford, I'm not sure how many players they had away at the World Cup. I think the teams that didn't have a lot of players away are going to be the teams going into the season better prepared. Whereas I think the top teams that had more players away will be the teams maybe struggling for fitness, struggling for sharpness, having to maybe play players in positions they don't normally play. And if you think about Spurs' front 3 this week, that's kind of been rumored that's going to start the game against Brentford, Moore, Tell, and Richarlison, you'd be very shocked if that was the starting lineup after the window in those positions.
Yeah. You're talking about Brentford, of course, being our first opponents for our first Premier League game of the 26-27 campaign. They recently beat Frankfurt 7-0 in a pre-season friendly. And I know a lot of people have been saying they seem more prepared than we do, but let's wait and see what happens in the next 15 days in the transfer window. And let's see what happens this coming weekend at the G-Tech Community Stadium. Gareth, going to start with a quote from Roberto De Zerbi on the summer transfer window, talking to Sky Sports and an interview with Men in Blazers. And he said, in the transfer market, we have not finished yet. And we have heard this quote a number of times, actually, in the last couple of weeks, particularly during the pre-season tour to New Zealand and Australia. He then goes on to say, the players who will arrive will then start. We're looking forward to start another season with different results. The club has been great because they closed very, very important players. I think we have not finished yet. Okay, we spent money, but other clubs made the same or more in the past. And to compete in the Premier League, you need first level of the players, the ambitions, what I said, the ambition of the owner, of the club, of the board, of the people who decide behind me are very important and very high. So we have to find a condition to build a strong team, a stronger team than the last season to compete again for the top of the table. Now, Roberto De Zerbi is always bigging up the board, is always bigging up the hierarchy, is always bigging up the fact that we are going big. He is being backed in this transfer window, etc. He is expecting big things because, of course, during one of the press conferences, during pre-season, he said about Bombers, which excited a lot of Tottenham Hotspur fans, Gareth, but he is certainly expecting more signings. And, before the transfer window opened, I myself said that I feel that Spurs need 10 or 12 players. We've got 6. We've got half of those in. And as you alluded to it at the start of the show, we haven't signed a player in a while now. If Roberto De Zerbi does not get what he wants, surely he's going to be upset because I think he's expecting quite a lot. So do you expect a busy last 15 days of the window for Tottenham in terms of incomings?
Yeah, I would expect at least 2 attacking players, if not 3. I know we'll come on to speak about the names. I know you're going to fire them out there, but it looks pretty certain that two are coming in. They've been heavily linked, and it does seem that we're waiting on their parent clubs to do business. One of the big stories of the window is obviously Bradley Barcola. It seems to be that PSG have just got those players on their plus hand now, so we may see a bit of movement regarding Barcola, and that may end up benefiting Spurs. And then obviously the one at Man City we'll speak about as well. But there's rumours of a third and possibly a number 9. I think that'll be the one that the fans really want, because I think even with those two attackers that we'll come on to speak about, I think a lot of Tottenham fans will still feel that we're quite weak in that area. Who's going to score the goals, Chris? We're not going to be relying on Richarlison and Solanke, are we? Because we've been in that position before. So I think, yes, those players have got ability, but they're not renowned goal scorers. So I think that striker is going to be crucial to this being a 8, 9 out of 10 window. It's currently for me at the minute, Chris, about 6 out of 10, because I'm looking at it. Defensively, are we any better off than we were? You could argue that, yes, getting Romero out the door because he doesn't want to be here, but is Van Hecke a better defender than Romero? It remains to be seen. I don't think you could answer that yet at the minute. Yes, he's probably better on the ball, but is he a better overall? Well, the season will judge that. Jed Spence for Andy Robertson, is that an upgrade? I'm not sure. Jed Spence again maybe wanted to move on, but Andy Robertson's in the twilight of his career. He's had a decent pre-season. What's going to happen with Udogie? Is he going to be fit? So there's a lot of question marks around have we actually improved. Senesi's obviously a good replacement in terms he's an upgrade on Dragusin, so we can be strengthened in terms of our squad. But in terms of the actual first 11 of the back four, that's going to remain to be seen. Kinsky's had a decent second half of the season, but is he going to be better long term than Vicario? Again, that'll have to be judged. The only area for me that we've definitely improved on is midfield. That's hands down. We can't argue with that. Tonali and Fernandez are brilliant players and a lot better than what we have. And yet we still haven't done anything up front. So, at the moment, you couldn't really say it's been an exceptional window. It solely now relies for me on getting these attacking players in that are better. And I don't mean just slightly. They've got to be a lot better than what we have. So I'm not as convinced with these players that they are a lot better than what we have, but we'll come on to speak about them.
Yeah, what I would say about the centre-backs, 2 ball-playing centre-backs, and I'd also say as well that it's very important that Roberto De Zerbi has players there that want to be there, that want to play for the football club. So, the likes of Romero, I don't think many people are upset about Romero going out the door. He clearly wanted out.
Yeah.
Now, someone who apparently clearly wants to join the football club is Savinho. We'll talk about him in a second. Football.London stated today that Tottenham have an option to extend Richarlison's contract by an extra year to protect him going out the door for, peanuts, basically. And there's been a lot of criticism, certainly today, and we'll come on, to talk about it in a minute, about the Vicario deal, about Spurs letting players go on the cheap. Now, let's talk about Savinho first of all. Now, before the charity or the Community Shield that you mentioned, before that game on Sunday, Fabrizio Romano said Savinho out of the Manchester City squad for the Community Shield as he wants the Tottenham Hotspur move. Negotiations continue with Tottenham Hotspur on a daily basis. And I might add here, Gareth, this is a player that we have been chasing now for over a year. So what on earth is going on with all of these discussions? Now, as you also mentioned, Fabrizio Romano has also stated that Spurs want to sign Savinho. They also want Cody Gakpo, and they also want a striker, someone to play centrally up front. Sky Germany on Cody Gakpo, they have stated that Tottenham are in very concrete talks with Cody Gakpo and have already made contact with Liverpool. However, a sources close to the player currently denies that any agreements have been reached. A move to Spurs is nevertheless a serious option for Cody Gakpo. Now, Enzo Maresca on Spurs target Savinho. He stated that he wasn't part of the session on Thursday. He was a little bit ill. Of course, he didn't play. Fabrizio Romano stated what he did about Savinho wanting the move to Tottenham. Now, Fabrizio Romano then goes on to say again Savinho wants to go to Tottenham. Savinho has an agreement with Tottenham, personal terms agreed. Savinho is waiting and is hoping that City and Tottenham reach an agreement soon. But we also have to respect Manchester City. As of today, they are still not giving the green light for Savinho to go. Gareth, I can't believe we're still talking about Savinho with 2 weeks remaining of the transfer window. What do you make of this situation with Savinho? Would you like to see him in a Spurs shirt? Would you like to see Cody Gakpo in a Spurs shirt? And who on earth is the striker? Because everyone at the moment is saying, who is out there?
The Savinho one's a very strange one, just based on Man City are saying they need a replacement, but he's never really been part of the plans at Man City, as far as I can see, for quite a long time. He's never really been a first team starter. He's a lot of games he hasn't got off the bench, but they seem very reluctant. They do business. Well, it's because they know Spurs really want them and they're trying to rinse as much money out of them as they can. But it seems very strange that this has run on as long as it has. And every time it seems to be getting closer, it kind of doesn't get done. The one thing I would say is I think this is probably the most likely deal that we will do. If somebody had to say to me now, who, if he had to pick one player that'll definitely join, I would say it'll be him. I think this will get done. Suppose my thoughts on him, Chris, is I would love to know what the club have seen from Savinho in the Premier League and the time he's been in the Premier League. They think that he's worth 70, 80 million and that he's better than, I don't think he's any better than Kudos. Unless he's going to play off the left. But again, I think there's better players around Europe that will be suited, and especially if Cody Gakpo's coming on. I don't know where Savinho fits in, so it's a strange one because his output isn't really there in terms of goals, assists. Very tricky technical player, but he's very lightweight. We know the Premier League's getting more physical every year now, it seems. And I just do not think this player suited the Premier League football. So, whilst I think he's talented, I don't think it's a wise investment from Spurs.
It's 2 goals in the 2 seasons that he's been at City, 9 assists in the Premier League. I suppose the big question is here, and I suppose Roberto De Zerbi has belief in himself that he could get a lot more out of Savinho. Do you? Because I have a lot of confidence. Me as a Spurs fan, I have a lot of confidence in Roberto De Zerbi, and I must say, Gareth, that the 2 training sessions that I watched in New Zealand and Australia, the way that he works with these players, the communication, the way that he puts the arm around the player, and you can see that he is improving player by player, week by week. Do you have that confidence about Savinho? Because I do agree with you. When you look at those stats, that isn't good enough. But half of the appearances in the Premier League were from the sub bench as well. That is, definitely worth adding.
The player's confidence has been totally taken out of him in terms of he's never really been in favour at Man City. So could a manager that has more confidence in him give him more starts? Do you get more out of him? Definitely. And there's a player on there. It's about like, I have this argument with Liverpool fans with Florian Wirtz. I think he's a very talented player, but I don't think he'll do it in the Premier League just based on I don't think he's suited to the league. So it'll be interesting. Look, if he comes on, I'll get behind him. And there's no doubt he's got moments of magic in him. But will he do it consistently? I'm not sure. And the one thing you would say is he's played a lot of his time on the left. It's on the left at City. But most players these days play on the opposite side. So if you've got Kudos and Savinho, I think Kudos potentially more dangerous and will definitely score more goals. If Cody Gakpo comes in, Savinho, are we signing a player for 80 million that isn't good enough for our front three? And when you think about it, we haven't got the best front three around. So could we potentially have spent that money on someone who would definitely be in the team? So I don't know. It's a funny one with me. I really hope he comes in and does well, but I think this is a massive risk. I think for 70, 75, 80 million, there was better value out there. But like you said, De Zerbi's proved himself. He's a top coach. I think the fans are behind him, but I think he'll be judged on this, Chris, as well. If this front three that he picks isn't good enough, then he'll have to take responsibility because there has players. Yes, Savinho's been linked before De Zerbi as well. So I don't know whether the clubs put him on this Savinho sort of track. But if you remember at Brighton, before Kudos went to West Ham, Brighton tried to sign Kudos and he was De Zerbi's pick. So Kudos is a player that De Zerbi favoured at one time a few years ago. So, has he got on board with the club in terms of this one, or is this his definite pick? Because Savinho spent most of last year on the bench. So what has De Zerbi seen in the last year? Do you think that should be he'd be a good pick for us? So whereas last summer Spurs was chasing Savinho before De Zerbi was here. So I'm a wee bit skeptical about how much De Zerbi actually wants Savinho. I think Cody Gakpo is definitely more a De Zerbi player.
Gareth, what's your opinion on the potential of Cody Gakpo signing for Tottenham? Can you see that happening? Because apparently De Zerbi also likes Cody Gakpo because he can play as a number 9. Would you think that would be the case? Because when you look at our forward players, particularly strikers, Richarlison and Dominic Solanke, how much confidence do you have in them staying fit and being available for De Zerbi? Because I just feel like we need another option. And I know that a lot of people will say that, we've got so many midfielders, which we'll talk about shortly. But when you talk about the attacking players, Odegaard is going to come back. Javi Simmons is going to come back. Mohamed Kudus is going to come back. And of course, we all hope that Dejan Kulusevski will come back at some point. So when you look at the potential squad, when everyone is fit and available, it does look pretty good. But I just feel like we do need another option, because when you look, under multiple different managers in the past couple of seasons, Solanke, who had a fantastic record at Bournemouth for not being injured, and then of course comes to Tottenham. Our injury record these last couple of years has been absolutely atrocious.
Well, this is it. And just I'll start with Cody Gakpo because, again, this is another player that I'm very unsure about. I think he's one of those players that can score goals. But if he's not scoring goals, I don't know what else he gives you. He's not lightning quick. He can't go past players. A lot of my friends are Liverpool fans, and they says whilst he's been useful for them, he's very much a one-track pony. He cuts it on the right foot, and for as many as he'll score in the corner, he'll put maybe twice as many over the bar. They feel that he's probably reached his level now at Liverpool, and he'll not improve much more. They think he'll be a decent player for Spurs, but some of the feedback I've got, if you spend 150 million on Savinho and Gakpo, they'd be like, he's overpaid massively for those two players. And that would be the feeling that I would be the same opinion that I would have. For 150 million pounds, if Savinho and Gakpo are the best that we can get, are they that much better than what we already have? I think.
Do you know what? Do you know what though? In the final couple of weeks of the transfer window, every single team out there in the world knows exactly what Tottenham Hotspur are after. So of course, At this stage of the transfer window, you're going to overpay, aren't you?
No, you're going to massively overpay. And then depending on who the striker is, obviously we don't know yet, but we could potentially be looking at 220, 230 million spent on these three players. And for me, they've got to be levels above what we have, not just slightly better. Whilst I'm not Tell's biggest fan, I think we've seen a bit of improvement there with him and a bit more potential. So, I think if Tell has a decent start to the season, is Gakpo that much better than Tell? I'm not sure. I think he's probably better around the box, and maybe De Zerbi's looking at it as a different option. But again, speaking to Liverpool fans, they say that whenever Gakpo has played through the middle when they've been short, he's really struggled as a striker. So it's not really worked for them. Yes, he can do it, but he's not really a number 9 either. He's more of just kind of player around the box that can score goals. He's not going to go past players too often. So again, I think he's a decent player, but for the money that's being talked about, I wanted somebody a bit better. So listen, I don't want to be too down here because I know the club are probably doing the best they can, but if we end up with Savinho and Gakpo as the two wide players and the money we've spent on those two, I think we'll be looking back going, we probably could have got better. Probably could have got better. But time's running out, and I suppose the club needed to do business. They have to get somebody in, but it just feels that either better players maybe haven't become available for us, and this is the best that we can get, or De Zerbi has seen something in these two players that he really, really wants. And listen, maybe he can make it work, but I don't think these two players are. I don't think Savinho's better than Kudos, and I think potentially in a year's time, Tell could be better than Gabko. So I don't think we will have upgraded that much.
Gareth, just very quickly, who would you choose? Who would you like to, if you had the choice to bring in 1, 2, 3 forward players right now? Who would they be, realistically?
I think a lot of the players that were available have moved. Like Ferran Torres was out there; he went to PSG. And that's not to say that. Listen, we don't know how far that was down the pipeline, but after the it was a fair few weeks after the World Cup that only came about because possibly we said about that domino effect with Barcola potentially going to Liverpool, Gapco going to Spurs, but the reason they're selling Barcola is because they've got Torres now. So if Barcola had been staying, would Torres have moved to PSG? Torres was an option. The Monaco youngster Alec Kucci also went to PSG. He was a player we were linked with. He looked potentially a very talented player. The player at Everton still there. He was linked with Saudi Arabia and Dai. I think he's a very good player. He's got Premier League experience as well. He's younger than Gapco, and he's shown a lot more than Savinho has. So I think Ndai really should have been an option we've been looking at. I don't think the money would have been ridiculous. I think probably around 50 or 60, maybe similar pricing to these two. But again, he's shown a wee bit more. And there was one more I was thinking of.
Krupi at the start of the window?
No, the Brentford player, Shara. I think he's a very good player. He was an R player I really liked. Krupi, yes, but he got injured. But again, I've seen a lot from Kevin Shara at Brentford to suggest he's a player that could possibly play off the left and play through the middle. And again, just think he would have been a better option than a Cody Gapco. But listen, that's why Roberto De Zerbi gets paid the big bucks. It's his decisions. If he thinks these players are more suited, then I really hope it works. And I hope Cody Gapco and Savinho are scoring goals for fun. And people are laughing at me on here in a few months' time saying, look at this clown. He didn't see this coming. But, I just think we will possibly regret our choices in this window.
Gareth, I suppose all of us need to trust Roberto De Zerbi with this rebuild and trust what he wants to do in terms of players going out the door and players coming in the door. And, this transfer window has been different. It broke our transfer record twice, £85 million with Fernandes and £100 million on Tonali, something that we probably thought that would never happen. Spurs spending £100 million on a player all in. Let me ask you about Richarlison, because there have been various reports and a lot more rumours today. And also, De Zerbi was asked about Richarlison, and he basically said sometimes he says he wants to stay, and sometimes he comes out and says he wants to leave. How disappointed would you be as a Spurs fan if Richarlison left in the next 15 days?
Well, I'll be very disappointed if he left in the next few days, because I'll be thinking who's going to play up front against Brentford. Because at the minute, he's our only option. We've let Langshear go. I'm not sure. Is Scarlett still there? Has he been loaned out? I'm not even sure. Is Scarlett an option for the weekend?
Scarlett is still there, but he didn't feature. He didn't feature in the pre-season friendlies at the weekend.
So I think he's injured. So Richarlison is priceless to Spurs at the moment because he has to play this weekend. We've got nobody else we can play up there. If we can get, if I had it my way, I would get two strikers on now and get rid of these two for the end of the window. Because as much as I really like Solanke, that's a major concern now. And Richarlison, I've never been on the hit train that some have been on. I know one of our regulars, Craig's, very, very critical of Richarlison, and rightly so. But I think he's scapegoated a lot as well. Is he good enough for this level? Of course not. But he always gives his best. He's 100%, gives you effort, which not all players do give you. But as they being, he's not going to be the answer for Spurs long term. So unfortunately, I struggle to see how we can move anyone on, because I think if we sign a striker, we're still going to need cover. So I think Richarlison and Solanke will probably still be here by the end of the window. But I don't see any sense in extending the contract. I really don't. I know the club will say that it's protecting value, but realistically, how much is Richarlison worth? You'd be very surprised unless Everton come on. We've seen already.
Those are the latest rumours again, Gareth, linking Richarlison with a move back to Everton, and we've seen many rumours stating that the player would be open to the move. I've no doubt that Richarlison would be open to the move. He absolutely loves the place.
They're potentially the only team that would give us any decent money for him, because if we sell him abroad, like we've seen with Romero and Spence, these teams just don't have the money.
Yeah.
Or if you sell to Brazil, where he's from, or whatever. I don't see him going to Saudi. I actually think they've possibly got bigger stars out there than him. So I don't really see any point in extending the contract, because I just think if we do, we could end up being stuck with him for another year after that. Whilst he's got a lot of critics as well, I think a lot of clubs don't want to put up with his antics as well. The shirt off and the kind of attention that he attracts as well. He's probably not, it's different when you're doing that every week, but I think he attracts a lot of attention when he scores a goal or he has a good game. And if you think about the next 5 or 6 games after, he doesn't really do it, does he? So I think it's a bit of a running joke at times with Richarlison. So listen, we're going to have to put up with him in the meantime, but I think if he's still here by the end of the window, we just need to let him go next year. We don't be extending any contracts, cut our losses and let him go. Because when you think that we've spent 60 million on him, and if he's here for 4 or 5 seasons, then we've got our money's worth, really, haven't we?
Gareth, talking about strikers and lack of strikers in this window, and I know we've spoken a little bit about this on these shows in the past couple of months since we've been doing them, about Chelsea signing Danny Welbeck. Are you surprised by that? Should Spurs have gone in for someone like Danny Welbeck, who has Premier League experience, who can put the ball in the net? And some of these prices in this window so far have either been really steep or very, very cheap.
I'm a bit surprised with Chelsea's policy. Whilst I think they've invested in the youth, and you can see there is an identity to what they're trying to do. Whether you agree with it or not is another thing, and it's probably not worked as well as they would have hoped. But to completely pivot that to go the opposite way, I thought was very strange. Does Henderson and Danny Welbeck get Chelsea back to winning Premier Leagues? Absolutely not. I don't see that happening. Even with no Champions League football this season, no European football.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's another option, because we're talking about having another option to Dominic Solanke and Richarlison. We need another option. I think back when Spurs signed Fernando Llorente, I think some people were surprised then. But you just needed another option. Instead of Harry Kane, Fernando Llorente was very good with his head.
But Llorente was a deputy to Kane, whereas if we sign Welbeck, he'd probably be starting for us. That would be the issue at the moment. I think Welbeck as a second striker, as a squad player, yes. But at the moment, are you having Welbeck or Richarlison this weekend? You're having Welbeck, aren't you? So it's a difficult one.
Do you know what Darren watching on Facebook says? We shouldn't have got rid of Will Lancashire, and I completely agree.
Yeah, well, there was quite a big TalkSport debate about this week about Will Lancashire. I don't know if you've seen it, but they're saying that potentially we may have sold the closest striker we've had to Harry Kane since. And he has got that kind of physique about him when Harry came through. It's big weight to be labelled with. But he kind of plays that same way that Harry did when he came through the ranks. So whenever I seen Will Lancashire, I was always impressed with him. So, yeah, but the club probably acted just because the money was very, very good for a player that wasn't going to be part of the first team this season. So it was probably too good to turn down.
Gareth, let's come on to today's news. Now, this morning, Fabrizio Romano stated Juventus have agreed a deal to sign Spurs goalkeeper Vicario. Here we go. Spurs accept loan proposal with buy option clause. Not an obligation, it is an option clause. Vicario wanted to move and leaves Tottenham Hotspur today, new goalkeeper for Juventus. Gianluca Di Marzio on this story, he has just stated Juventus have a buy option clause of 10 million euros for Vicario. Fabrizio Romano again reported about him and said Vicario has now landed in Turin to sign in at Juventus from Spurs. Loan deal with 8 million euros plus 2 million euros buy option clause. What do you make of this? Because I know we'll come on to talk about Jed Spence and Romero, their low fees that they went to Atletico Madrid and Inter Milan. What do you make of this fee for Vicario? Because if they have a 2 million buy option at the end of the season, then surely that is going to be Vicario leaving for good.
We could have got more at a yard bid sale for him, so we could have. And that's not being, 2 million euros. I mean, he's had a bad season, Vicario, but 2 million euros is a lot better than that. I mean, I can't believe that that's what Spurs have agreed to. Yes, again, maybe they felt that they were running out of options. They get him gone. They didn't want to be paying his wages all year, and he wasn't going to play. But this is a really strange one. That the fact that we could only get 10 million euros all in, and that first season's on loan. I was shocked when I seen that today. But maybe the club felt again that if he didn't accept this, where was his options? Inter Milan was no longer an option. The only reason Juventus is an option is because the Martinez deal fell through. He was clearly not at the top of anyone's list. So maybe the club are looking at differently to us, Chris. Maybe they're thinking, happy days, we've got him out the door. We don't have to pay his wages all year. So, listen, he's played his last game for Tottenham. I don't think he'll be back. So good luck to him. It started quite well with Vicario, but it just ended so badly. So I hope he rebuilds his career out in Juventus. But it was time for him to go.
What will be your fondest memory of him?
What, good or bad?
Good.
I'd say the first sort of the first 9 games of the Ange era, he looked unbeatable at one point in those first 9 games. Even the Chelsea game that night, the 4-1, and the 10th game, he actually probably kept the score down that night, but it just went. There was a particular game in that first season against Man City in the FA Cup. I don't think he ever recovered after teams seen that weakness from set pieces. He just could not cope. And then obviously over the last couple of seasons, teams have been more direct. There's been corners have been more difficult to defend. Long throws have returned. And he's just not a strong enough goalkeeper to be able to deal with those type of things. So that's obviously been recognised by De Zerbi. And, I'm not sure how much De Zerbi values Kinski. Yes, he likes him, but do you think if De Zerbi's going to be here for 4 or 5 years, do you think Kinski will be the number one during that whole era? Possibly not. I think maybe he's given him an opportunity this year, but it wouldn't surprise me if we went and got a new number one next year. So I think Kinski's got a bit of a trial year. But De Zerbi had obviously seen enough in Vicario. They know that he wasn't going to be able to be the goalkeeper for him.
Gareth, of course, this week, Romero, Spence and Phillips all left the football club, and we got 3 official announcements and statements on Saturday, the day of the Hoffenheim friendly at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Now, Sky Sports News stated that Tottenham and Inter Milan agreed a £30 million deal for Jed Spence, and Tottenham have included a 10% sell-on clause. Now, Jed Spence made 85 appearances in Tottenham Hotspur colours, and he sent a message to the Tottenham Hotspur fans. He said, a special chapter comes to an end. It's been some journey with plenty of memories, moments and experiences that I will carry with me forever, especially that night in Bilbao, as we do. Thanks to all of the staff members who helped me along the way, the players who have become family, and most importantly, thank you to the fans. Time for a new chapter now, but Spurs will always have a place in my heart. First of all, what do you make of the departure of Jed Spence? And because I think a lot of people are quite upset about this one, particularly what a great World Cup campaign he had in the summer.
It's not a surprising one, but I think we spoke about this earlier in the summer, Chris, that this was one we could see happening, just based on the fact that he had that good World Cup and that he wasn't going to be first choice. He was going to always be behind Pedro Porro in the right back slot. And with Robertson coming in, and if he doggies fit, he was relying on possibly 3 injuries to get into the team. So I think the club have realised that this may be the best value they're going to get from him, because if he doesn't play as much next year, remember, we've only got 1 game a week. If fullbacks stay fit, then Spence wouldn't have got as much game time as he had in the last few seasons. Therefore, his value maybe would have decreased. But I'm surprised that we've only managed to get 30 million for him. Yes, if you look around Europe, there's problems in Italy with money. So Inter Milan are maybe hamstrung in terms of that they can only pay so much for players. But I think if you had sold Spence in our English team, we probably would have got 40, 50 million for him, just because of how good his World Cup was. He's homegrown, English, still young enough. He's 24, 25, I think. Still got his best years ahead of him. He's powerful. He can play on both sides. He can actually play further forward if he's needed. So I am quite surprised that we've only managed to get 30 million for him. But maybe the club feels safer selling him abroad as they may be selling him in our Premier League team. And maybe coming back to haunt us. So, look, from what I hear, the player wanted to go there as well. So maybe we owed it to Spence because he's done a good job. He's probably been one of few players that managed to stay fit in the last 2 seasons. He's played different positions. He's obviously had a big impact. So listen, I'm sure the club were happy. They didn't sell him. They didn't sell him if they weren't happy with the terms. So maybe it was a good deal all around. I think in terms of Inter Milan getting a good player for a good fee, Spence wanted to move on, and Spurs are happy with maybe Robertson coming on as his replacement. So look, we'll see. But definitely out of the two, Romero and Spence, there definitely seems to be a lot more fans a bit disappointed with this one.
Of course, Gareth, on the same day, Christian Romero has also departed the football club, signing a 5-year deal at Atletico Madrid until June 2031. Now, 40 million euro package, add-ons included, 15% sell-on clause. What do you make of this one?
It depends what way you look at it. If you're Atletico Madrid, they've got a potentially top-class defender for 35 million. But potentially the best value defender of the summer. But what Romero are you going to get? If Argentina get the Romero that plays for Argentina, then they've had an absolute blinder. And the one reason that makes me think that they will is Romero is a massive fan of Simeone, who's also Argentinian. So he's got the perfect manager. He wanted to move to Spain. There's no real excuses now for Romero. If he doesn't have a good experience at Atletico Madrid, solely down to him, in my opinion. But do you think it was the right decision to sell? Absolutely, because I don't think we would have ever seen the best of Romero if we had kept him. So yes, it's a bit frustrating that we've only managed to get around 35 million for him, because we know in this market he's worth a lot more. But I feel like the club are really backed into a corner here. And Chris, again, a bit like we mentioned with Richarlison, I think a lot of top clubs were potentially looking at Romero and going, we don't want the hassle of Romero coming in the door. So they decided against maybe going for him. You think about, I think Barcelona were looking at him, but they decided against it because of his character and his personality. So, there would have been a lot of clubs in the same boat as Barcelona regarding Romero. So I think he's lucky that he believes in him and has given him a way out, to be honest.
It's interesting, Gareth, because in the club statement, his 32 appearances in all competitions last season took his tally to 156 in our colours. Now, of course, he signed for us in 2021. So 5 years, 156 appearances. And I read a stat somewhere the other day that he'd missed 100 Spurs games in the 5 years that we'd had him as a Tottenham Hotspur player. Of course, last season he was our captain. Of course, a lot of people, including myself, was very upset that He planned to be in Argentina for that final game against Everton, when Spurs could have gone down. That didn't go down at all well with the Spurs fan base. How would you remember Romero? Because it's interesting when he put out a note basically saying that he knows he's not perfect. He admitted he's not perfect.
I think it's if Romero had left after the Europa League final, he would have been remembered as a hero because of that performance in Bilbao. It was incredible. But he had probably his worst year in a Tottenham shirt was last year. He had a number of red cards and a number of ridiculous decisions he made. There was clearly a lack of effort in some of the games, and you only have to look at some of the goals that were done. He wasn't giving his best. And I think a lot of Tottenham fans last year, it probably contributed to the position we were in the league and fears of relegation. But, he'll probably go down as one of the worst ever captains as well. So I think within 12 months, he completely set his whole Tottenham career on fire. Then on the last day of the season, all that talk of him being in Argentina, I think by then anyway, a lot of fans had already washed their hands of him. So the fact that, at that point, it didn't even bother me that he was going to potentially be it. I know he came back for it, but the fact that he was going to be in Argentina anyway didn't really bother me because I had already washed my hands of him at that point, and I knew he was not going to play again for Spurs, so it didn't really bother me. But I think it was still disrespectful to the club and the fans.
Do you know what, Gareth? I know it's been and gone, and I know we shouldn't keep going on about it, but I think it's worth noting that there's no way on this planet you'd get someone like Ledley King or Gary Mabbutt, Steve Perryman, etc. They would not have made that decision. No way.
Even modern day captains like Harry Kane and Son, they wouldn't have done that.
Exactly. But in this, it was a very long goodbye message. It's been posted all over social media if you want to read it and look at it. But I'll pick a couple of lines out here. He said, "I know I wasn't perfect, but one thing gives me peace. I always gave everything. I defended this shirt with pride and all of my heart. Thank you for everything. I'm leaving the club, but a part of my heart will always remain here. Once I was one of you. Today I leave as one of you forever. With all of my love and respect. Thank you for everything and goodbye." Now, on the same day, as I mentioned, Ashley Phillips now signed for Middlesbrough. It's a shame because we signed these young players fully expecting to give them a go and develop these young players, and then for only a lot of people say this, only for a couple of years later we then end up selling these players. How are you feeling about the development side of things? I know we'll go through quite a few of the development players because a lot of them were given opportunities by Roberto De Zerbi over the pre-season friendlies. But Ashley Phillips, should he have been given a chance? How frustrated are you by these young players not getting opportunities?
I know we've signed, and he's one of the ones that we've actually went to a club and signed. So we can speak about some of the youth players, but I think we signed him off Plymouth. Is that correct? Ashley Phillips, did we sign him off Plymouth?
I'll come back.
No, sorry, Blackburn. Blackburn was nothing.
Blackburn Rovers.
Blackburn. Sorry, I think he was unknown at Plymouth at Spurs. I think something like that. But I think we signed him off. So he was an hour player that we signed from an hour club. And if you think back to Valise recently as well, and there was an hour one I think that's left. I can't remember now who it was. But these players come on, basically hardly ever played a game for us, and were sold. So it was quite strange. But the one thing I would say with this one that's a bit different. There's quite a lot of money involved in this deal, Chris. I think potentially, does this deal rise to 20 million?
Yeah, I think it's very unrealistic though.
Oh, is it right? Well, if 7 million up front and possibly 13 million in add-ons, depending on what the add-ons are. But they've made quite a bit of profit on this player. Even if they were to get 10 million for him, I think they only signed him for maybe 2 million. So they've made a bit of profit on this player. Whereas some of the other players, I think they signed, ended up leaving for less, the likes of Valise or maybe a couple of our players. But yes, it is a bit frustrating when you see player, and especially for someone like yourself, Chris, when a player comes in, you do a lot of homework on them only for them never to play and then be sold on a few years later. Almost feels very frustrating. But in regards to the development pathway for players already at the club, the likes of Will Langshear, Dane Scarlett, Mikey Moore. It's a difficult one because it depends. I think within an academy, you'll always get one or two standout players. Probably, Harry Kane was ours. You think back the our clubs around England, the man of Saka for Arsenal. 9 times out of 10, these great prospects don't tend to they end up going to our clubs. They rarely do they break through at one of the what we've actually seen recently is some of these players leave these top clubs and then get signed by our big clubs in a few years' time. We've seen this with Morgan Rogers, for example. Man City went to Aston Villa, and now he's been bought for 120 million by Chelsea. Elliot Anderson, Newcastle, they Nottingham Forest, 120 million to Man City. So you're going to get that from time to time. But were them players ready at the time to come into that team? It takes a very brave manager to do that. If you're going to give Mikey Moore a chance this year, he's got to score goals. He's got to produce. There's no De Zerbi won't stay in a job because he's given Mikey Moore time. Mikey Moore's got to perform to keep De Zerbi in a job. So it's difficult. If we sign Savinho, Cody Gapco, you've got Kudos, you've got Tell, you've got Odegaard to come back, Xavi Simons to come back. Where does Mikey Moore fit in? It's a difficult one. Mikey Moore probably needs injuries and they remain at the club and have a Harry Kane spell. Harry Kane got a chance at Spurs because Soldado and Adebayor weren't performing. That was he was given an opportunity and he took it. That's what usually happens with these young players. We've seen it with Liverpool last year. They're a wee bit short, and the young lad Ngamoa has done quite well, and now Liverpool are keeping him on the squad. Whereas Mikey Moore's always been sent out on loan, so it might suit Mikey Moore to stay at Spurs this year. And maybe if there is a few injuries and he breaks into the team and he starts scoring goals and creating goals, then it's very difficult to take him out of the team. But I think if everybody's fit, it's going to be very difficult for the manager to select him because he signed all these players.
Gareth, we do seem to be very overloaded in the central midfield area now, particularly after the signings of Tonali and Fernandes. A two-part question for you here. With the fees on their heads of £85 million and £100 million, are they going to feel the pressure, going into this new campaign? And because there seems to be a lot of talk, particularly in the media, about Spurs overpaying for these players. Of course, we as Spurs fans know that we need this quality of player, regardless of how much they cost. And also, the second part to this question is, where does it leave the futures for the likes of Bergvall, Sarr, Bentancur?
To answer your question about Tonali and Fernandes, I don't think they'll feel the pressure, just based on their characters. I don't think they're them types of players that are going to be, they're very much hustle and bustle and they like getting involved. And I just think that they will be the
media. It will be the media getting on their back, though, won't it?
I don't think those two players will take much notice of it. And you think with some of the things that Tonali's come back from, his personal life allegations and stuff, I don't think he's going to shirk pressure. I just don't. And Fernandes, South American, I just don't. Yes, there might be a bit of media pressure, but from what I've seen of Fernandes so far, he looks really, really good. He really whops that ball. You can see him creating goals. Yeah. They're the two players at the moment that give you hope. You think that those two players could potentially get into most teams in the Premier League. We haven't really had that for a while. I think if you look at our clubs, they would take those two players now. But in terms of what it does for Bergvall, Sarr, I think Bergvall will definitely move, just because in this last week of the window, Newcastle and Forest are going to be desperate, and I think they may offer Spurs a deal that they can't refuse. We're hearing Spurs want 50 plus. I could even see them maybe getting 60 for him. And I think 60 million is going to be 55, 60 million is going to be difficult to turn down for a player that's not part of the starting. It's clearly going to be Tonali, Fernandes, and Gallagher until Maddison's back, and then Maddison probably comes in for Gallagher, and then Gallagher can play in different roles. So I think Bergvall's potentially, and depending on how he sees it with Archie Gray, Bergvall's potentially 5th or 6th choice. I think Sarr's even further down the line, but whether Sarr's got as many suitors, I'm not sure. If Sarr's, if we can only get a fee of 20 million for Sarr, I think you're as well keeping him, because he could potentially have an impact in the season at some stage. But I think when if you're getting big money for these players, it's going to be very difficult for them to turn down. And whilst I think there'll be a lot of disappointment if Bergville leaves, it'd be very difficult for the club to turn that down. But again, we need to go out and invest in on a big striker with that money, because it's all good and well selling these players for big fees. But I was actually looking at it, Chris, this week. You sell Bergville now, and you're not far off balancing the books.
I was about to mention net spends. Yeah,
we haven't spent a great deal then when you think about it. So this all needs to be reinvested in the top class front three.
Yeah.
So look, there's a comment here about Luca Williams-Burnett. I think he's probably been the star of the preseason, Chris, from what I've seen. He looks really, really potentially frightening.
Him and Tell.
Yeah, but I tell, of course, yeah. But whenever he gets an opportunity, it's very difficult to give these players opportunities at the moment. It's because the pressure's really on to get into the top four, and you would feel that with one game a week, this is our opportunity. This is our opportunity, really, Chris. They do it. If we end up finishing sixth and we're in the Europa League next year with more games, it'll be potentially more difficult. So they'll be going all out for a top four finish and possibly targeting the cup runs as potentially a good season. So I'd be shocked if we're going down the route of giving these youngsters a chance, unless it's injury related and we're stuck and we have to, and they come on and they do really well.
Is a Champions League spot for Tottenham next season? Is it realistic, Gareth? Because I'm a very optimistic fan. I always like to be positive about things, but you've also got to be very realistic about it. We finished 17th in the last couple of seasons. Going from 17th to the top 5 is hell of a task. And it's funny because I was going to mention this later on in the show, but I'll mention it now. Sky Sports, their supercomputer, they predicted Arsenal will win the league again. They predicted City will finish 2nd, Liverpool 3rd, Manchester United 4th, Chelsea 5th, and they have predicted that Spurs will finish in 6th spot. Now, if Spurs signed Cody Gakpo and Savinho and we brought in a striker, can Spurs get into the top 5 and finish in the Champions League spot? Because De Zerbi is clearly very ambitious. He wants to do very, very well at Tottenham. But as a fan base, I don't know whether you listened to the piece that I did with BBC Sport earlier. I was very optimistic. I was very optimistic and said, I think that Spurs will be aiming for a top European spot. But if we want that European spot, then we will need forward players. And
Rob Green didn't agree, did he?
Rob Green didn't agree at all. He thought I was so optimistic, although I said that we need strikers and forward players. They seem to think that Spurs have really overspent, and they seem to think that the squad balance, really wasn't that great. So
I've just actually remembered there as well. We've got Bentancur there as well. So that midfield is really overloaded. I can't believe I forgot about him. So again, that's another player I think's ahead of Bergville and Sarr. So I definitely think those two could potentially leave. And then, of course, maybe that allows us to go and spend a bit more money in the attack. But at the minute, Rob Green's got a point. We're overloaded in midfield, and we haven't got the quality up front. Now, it's a difficult. People are always asking now, right? Name your top 4, but the transfer window hasn't closed yet, so you're making a judgment based on.
Yeah.
You're either forgetting what might come on, or you're judging it with what might come on.
Well, what I judge it on, because everyone, I think, I say everyone, most Spurs fans, they look at our transfer window, but then they forget or don't really research other people's transfer windows. So they don't know what other teams have done around us. So based on last season, because I think the Premier League, I know we're going to talk about this on the Premier League prediction show on Wednesday, Gareth, but I think it's going to be a very, very interesting Premier League campaign, because you've got, Maresca now being questioned after one game by a lot of fans, by a lot of pundits. You've got you've got Andoni Iraola going at Liverpool. So you've got so many different changes. Newcastle, what have they done to their squad? The manager's gone. Aston Villa,
Xabi Alonso, Chelsea,
exactly. So there's so many different projects and things going on.
I think it's the most wide open Premier League for a long time. And I think with this World Cup as well, being it ran on so long and players coming back now, I do think it's potentially set up for a freak winner. Maybe not like a Leicester, but I think back to the year after Leicester when Chelsea won it. Chelsea finished 12th under Mourinho. I think he was sacked mid-season. Conte come on, they won the league. We 1 game a week. We've seen this before with teams. You've seen it last year with Man United. 15th, sacked the manager and finished third.
Yeah.
So it can be done. There's no reason why Spurs can't go from 17th to 4th. United went from 15th to 3rd. And United benefited. They were out of the League Cup after one round. I can't remember. I think it was Grimsby beat them, and they went out of the FA Cup after the first round. They played 40 games last season, Man United, the shortest season possible, but they finished third just because they had no injuries in that second half of the season, and Bruno Fernandes was on fire. So, listen, it can be a big benefit not playing in Europe, and there's 11 teams out of 20 in Europe this year. So, of course, Chelsea and Spurs have a huge advantage, but I do think if there's going to be anyone to challenge Arsenal, it potentially might come from Chelsea or Spurs. Not because I think they're great teams. I just think Man City now is going to be a big rebuilding job for the manager. And I think with Rodri going, that's a huge loss now. We're talking about their leader. But in my opinion, the best number 6 in the world of football. We've seen that at the World Cup, how inspirational he was to Spain. He has one player that's irreplaceable. Even if Declan Rice went on there beside Elliot Anderson, them two together for me still not better than Rodri. He's literally irreplaceable. But like Harry Kane when he left Spurs, there was nobody we could have signed that would have done the job that Harry could do. So Pep leaving as well. I think Man City will be happy just to get back into the top 4 this year and rebuild next year. And the manager might have a wee bit more nice about the squad. Liverpool, I think, could go either way. I think the managers they've got's a really decent manager, but they're relying on getting players in now in the last couple of weeks. As it stands, you ask a Liverpool fan at the minute, they don't even think they'll get into the top 4 or 5 unless they get players in that attacking area because they've lost Mo Salah. And that's a huge loss to Liverpool. Ekitike, who was their best striker last year, is out injured until January, a bit like Xavi Simons for us. So they're a wee bit short. Man United have the combined Champions League football with Premier League football, which is always going to be difficult. Yes, they've signed a couple of good players, but not nearly enough if you talk to Man United fans. So at the minute, Arsenal are looking good. But I still think they're light in the forward area as well. They haven't, Vinicius was linked. They didn't sign him. So I think they need at least one player to come on there. So they are the favourites at the minute, Chris, just purely because the other teams maybe aren't strong enough. And going back to back, it's hard. We've seen Alex Ferguson talk about it. It's very difficult to do. So a lot of people got carried away with that Community Shield history. But let's be honest, they played a very underprepared, Man City team. And you say what you want about Community Shields. I don't read into them at all. Only one of the last 8 winners have only won the Premier League or something like that. It rarely ends up the one of the Community Shield one in the Premier League. So that's how much you would read into that. So I do think it is set up for the likes of Chelsea and Spurs to potentially get themselves involved. But for me, they both need to do a lot more business and they both need to be a bit more brave in these last 2 weeks of the window.
Gareth, on Sunday's podcast after the 2-2 draw against Hoffenheim behind closed doors, Richard Whitehead was on the podcast and I asked him a question and said, what in terms of league position, what would be a failure? He said anything below 8th. Would you agree with that?
Anything below a Europa League spot for me would be a failure. So I'm not sure if that would be 6th or 7th. It would depend on varying situations, but if we weren't playing at least Europa League football next season, I think that would be a failure. If we're in the Conference League, to me, we'd be better off better off not being in it at all. You'd rather finish out of it and go again next year with 1 game a week. But I think notoriously we've seen it with Chelsea and Man United. Even our last season without Europe, I think it was first season around we finished 5th. I think it'll be, and you could argue that by the end of this window we should have a stronger squad now than we had then. And there's no Pep around, there's no Jurgen Klopp around. So you could argue it's a weaker league as well. So for me, anything other than Europa League football would be a failure.
I've got to mention this because we have recorded so many shows, particularly last year, talking about Thomas Frank and not shooting from outside the box. I don't know whether you recall all of those conversations we've had, but during this pre-season under De Zerbi, players like I mentioned Tonali, of course he scored against Chelsea. Fernandes scored that fantastic goal in the opening pre-season friendly against MK Dons. We are certainly not afraid to have a shot from outside the box, and the wonderful crosses that we have seen so far, particularly from the likes of Andy Robertson. We've brought in, a real experienced player, leader, but he can certainly put a cross into the box. And like you mentioned, the Fernandes cross for Ben Davies against Hoffenheim. I'm very excited about the crosses that we're putting in. But of course, Gareth, we'll say it again, it's so important that you've got those forward players in there.
If you're relying on Ben Davies to score goals, you're in trouble, aren't you? So we need those strikers. Funny, I actually think Solanke and Richarlison will probably benefit from that style of crosses because they're both decent in the air. But the biggest concern, listen, you can be critical of those two and their limitations, but I think their biggest weaknesses is their injury record more than anything else. They're not reliable enough. Do you think they're the worst players in the world? No, definitely not. We've had worse strikers than Richarlison and Solanke. We've had a lot worse, but it's a reliability is their issue. And that for me, we cannot be going on the October playing Matthias Tell or Cody Gakpo through the middle when we know their best positions are out wide. So I think we need to bring in an absolute juggernaut up front. And if that means that Bergville and Sarr, if they move on to get that juggernaut, then so be it. But I don't want to come to the end of the window, Chris, and look at this. Spent 300 million, but we've sold 300 million. Then we haven't spent anything at all, have we? We've this big window that was promised. You need to go out now and bring in a top quality striker. And now people will say, "Who is that?" But that's up to the club. They should. There's no secret that they've been looking for a striker. They should have a target, B target, and C target, and even a list of maybe D and E. Should be 5 targets in there, and you go and get one of them.
Does it make it worse in some ways that De Zerbi come out and said about bombers?
I think it got everybody's hopes up, didn't they? It was funny. It was convenient that apparently then it was Krippy and he just happened to get injured, which I don't buy at all. I think that was just conveniently put out to them to appease the fans. But Chris, there is top strikers out there, but and we've seen it with Tonali and we've seen it with Fernandes. They were linked with our clubs. Tonali was linked with Arsenal. Fernandes linked with Man. If you go out and you spend and you tell this player your project, they might want to come. So, people might laugh, but Julian Alvarez, what's they say we can't attract him? He's at Atletico Madrid, yes, but Tonali had offers of Arsenal, who were the champions. Matheus Fernandes of Man United, biggest club in England, and they still came to Tottenham. So why not go out and test the water?
No, if he speaks to Romero, he won't.
Well, that's true, yeah. Don't we go on there?
Right, 2 more departures this week, Gareth. Manor Solomon to West Ham. The deal was £5 million plus £2 million in bonuses. Spurs also have a 10% sell-on clause for the winger. That is from the Athletic. It's interesting, isn't it? Sell-on clauses for Manor Solomon, Jed Spence, Christian Romero, and another player that's gone out the door, but this one is a loan. Yang Min Hyuk has joined Belgian Pro League side Westerlo. What do you make of the departure of Solomon and the loan move for Yang Min Hyuk?
That was the player I couldn't remember. When I says about Valise and Phillips and the Korean fella, he's away on loan again. He was on loan last year as well. He's an R player that's not going to play for us again. He'll just be loaned out until he's sold. So again, you can tear up your notes on him, Chris, from when he signed. You'll not need to remember them. But again, the only thing that I think strange about that loan is why has he not been loaned in our English team? Because I think he done quite well at Portsmouth, was it? Or was it Portsmouth or QPR? He was at?
Yeah, and then he went to Coventry.
Coventry, yeah, he done quite well. I think it was one of those loans they were raving about him. So the fact he's moved to Belgium now, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of these foreign loans. I always want to see them stay in England. But the R player that left, Solomon, wasn't it, you were saying?
Yeah.
I think that was in the pipeline for a while. I think when he signed under Ange, there was optimism about him, but just hasn't really worked out. He got a really bad injury and never really found his way back into favour. So I think, again, it was a decent fee, possibly 7 million for a player that I think, to be honest, Chris, Championship's his level. I think he'll do quite well. He done quite well at Leeds in the Championship. And I think their West Ham are about to sign Peru from Leeds as well. And Solomon and Peru had a good relationship at Leeds. So it might be that West Ham are, they might be West Ham's 2 best players.
Gareth, let's talk a little bit about Jamie Donnelly, because he's being rumoured at the moment, and I've got a couple of friends who are Leyton Orient fans, and they would absolutely love him back for another loan spell. Jamie Donnelly, what have you made of him during pre-season? Is this a player that should get an opportunity at Tottenham, or for his own development, is it best to loan him back to Leyton Orient, where he did very well before?
Remind me, I think he's potentially been in the last 3 or 4 pre-season tours. He's been a player that's impressed in pre-season a number of times, but never really seems to get an opportunity. I remember him playing under Ange in a pre-season tour in like an inverted left-back role. I thought he'd done really well because he could play in the middle, and we've seen him play as a number 10 for Leyton Orient and stuff. He's also become a Northern Ireland international over here as well. And I know the Northern Ireland fans are very, very happy that he has done that, and he's became like a starter for Northern Ireland. So again, that's brilliant experience for him. I think it's getting to the point now with Donnelly, Chris, and you'll probably see he'll be asking, what's the plan here? Am I just going on an hour loan again? Am I going to get into a team at any stage here? Because he can play in a few different positions. And I just wonder if Donnelly's going to be an hour player that we're trying to increase his value to sell for a big fee. A big fee in relatively like maybe championship terms. Are we trying to bring his value up to maybe around 10 million to try and sell? I don't know, because I think he's done enough in pre-seasons to be given an opportunity, and especially the positions. He can play in a few different positions, a bit like an Archie Gray. Only he's a left-footed player. He could play at left back, he could play in the middle, he could play as a number 10. And I felt that he could have been used in recent seasons and them roles, but he's always been sent out in loan. So it'll be very interesting to see where he goes. Going back to Leyton Orient, Chris, as much as your friends might like that, and he's done quite well there, I don't think that's a good move for his development, just going back there on loan.
Need a new challenger.
Yeah.
During the week, Fabrizio Romano, on following Balogun, he said several clubs have called over recent days for Balogun, including Galatasaray and Saudi clubs, informed on deal conditions from Monaco. Nothing concrete or advanced with Tottenham. It was later rubbished by a number of reliable journalists that it wasn't a move for Tottenham. What other options are there realistically, though, Gareth, for us?
I think at the minute around Europe there's a real gap.
Well, do you know what? Before you speak, let me give you a quote from Jamie O'Hara, because he's been talking on Sky Sports, and he said, "I don't know why Spurs just shouldn't go for Marcus Rashford. I think that Spurs should go and say, how much do you want? We can get him. I know he's on £350,000 a week, and obviously Spurs potentially can't afford that, but he is such a brilliant player. If you can go and get him, it will prove a point. I just think that he is still one of the best players around. If he stays at Man United, I think he'll play. What do you think about the Marcus Rashford?
Well, I was just about to say, I think there's a real gap in terms of top number 9s around. Is Rashford better as a striker than he is out wide? Again, I don't think so. I think he's better out the left when he's cutting on that right foot. I think that's where he's played most of his career. Yes, he's played through the middle, but he's not an out-and-out number 9 as well. Funny enough, I was chatting to, group chats this week, Liverpool fans. I says, it's getting to the point. This is literally what I put into a chat about 2 days ago. It's getting to the point now for me with some of these players that we're in link with, Savinho and Gapco, where I'm at the point now where let's just go and get Marcus Rashford. Now, I did say earlier in the window that I would really only want him on a loan deal. And yes, we've had our fingers burned before with loan deals, but this would be a very different type of loan deal in terms of we're not taking somebody's crap. We're taking potentially a world-class footballer here who on his day can score bags full of goals. It's not a Colombiani who's outcast at a PSG because of his attitude. He was outcast at a PSG because of his quality. Whereas this player...
So you just said Rashford can create and he can also score. So what's the problem?
Yeah. So the problem for me is if you sign him on a permanent deal, you're going to end up with a problem down the line because he's going to down tools at some stage. So if we can get him on some sort of loan deal where we pay all his wages and then reevaluate next year. But I think the minute you sign Rashford on a permanent contract, you've lost him. Or you lose him within a few months because, yes, he might come on, he might start on fire, but as soon as things go down, he'll down tools, and he did it at Man United, and that's his boyhood club. He'll do it at Spurs. So I think, like we've seen at Aston Villa and Barcelona when it's on a loan deal, is shit hot. And if we can get him, for me, £350,000 a week for him is an absolute bargain, because if he's on a loan deal, he's a pointy proof. He'll score goals, and let's be honest, he's better than any player we have in that forward area at the club. So he's an automatic player on that team. And but like I says, with my Liverpool friends, Savinho, Cody Gakpo, do they get you off your seat at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium? Probably not. Does Marcus Rashford get you off your seat? Absolutely. And when he's through on goal, it's a bit like that feeling you have with Harry Kane. He scores more than he misses. So, and one more thing I would say, for an opposition team, defenders and fans, they look at a team with Marcus Rashford in it and there's fear, because they know he's a body. I don't think you get that with Savinho and Gakpo. So for me, we're at the point now where Rashford needs to be looked at as a real possibility. What would Man United sell the Spurs, or give him the Spurs on loan? I think they'd be forced to, because he's got a massive problem there in terms of his wages. So any club willing to pay his wages, I think they let him go.
Whenever I mention Marcus Rashford on this channel, there is such a huge divided opinion. Simon on Facebook says wouldn't touch him with a barge pole.
But why?
A lot of people are big fans of Rashford.
Chris, if Rashford come in the first game and started scoring goals, I guarantee the fans will be singing his name. Football is very fickle. As soon as a player starts performing, they would be scoring goals. If scoring goals, Rashford would have a song. James Black would be doing a song for him in the second game. He'd have an album out for the third game.
Gareth, lastly, I'm going to finish on some good news, because this last week or so, Fabrizio Romano and Mickey van der Ven. Mickey van der Ven has signed a new 5-year deal at Tottenham, following Pedro Porro earlier this summer. Key player for Tottenham, long-term project, strongly wanted by Roberto De Zerbi. Mickey van der Ven on signing a new deal at Spurs. He said it's a special moment to sign a new deal and a proud moment for me and my family. I've always loved Spurs from the first day I stepped in at the club. I love the club, I love the fans, and I've developed really well here. Roberto De Zerbi on Mickey van der Ven signing a new deal. He said Mickey is one of the best centre-backs in Europe and an important player for us. Now, he is a very important player for us. Great news for us. A future captain of the football club, no doubt. Great news, isn't it?
It's quite a turnaround too, because if you think back around February or March time last year, it didn't look like Van der Ven was going to be staying. There's a lot of noise.
And a handful of others, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't look that happy at the club. But the Zerbis finally seemed to have changed that completely. So I think it's brilliant news for us. We get that contract signed. It protects the club as well. If anybody was to come on for him next year, it would be a big fee to buy him out of that. So no, it'll be interesting to see captain-wise what De Zerbi does now ahead of the season. Very highly likely that Maddison gets it. But Maddison's going to be injured from time to time. There's no point denying that he's going to be injured. Even if he's fit in the next couple of weeks, he'll be injured a few weeks after that. That's just the way he is. So, who's going to be the captain in his absence? I think Van der Ven's having a great chance of getting it.
Gareth, anything else you'd like to add that we haven't mentioned in this episode?
I'm trying to think here. We've covered a lot. The only other one I'll mention, because the comments have come in here about Osimhen. I think Osimhen's in the same boat as Rashford, but I think he has his attitude problems. That's why he's been shifted out to Turkey. I'm sure, he would have been playing in Europe if he didn't have these problems. And I think the difference with Osimhen and Rashford at the minute is Osimhen's not available on a loan. You have to pay 130, 140 million to get him. I just think, Chris, on a loan deal, Rashford, there's very little to lose and a lot to gain. If he downs tools on a loan deal, then yes, it's not convenient, but he'll be gone in a few months' time after that. It's not as if he's going to be signed, sealed, and sitting there for years and years and years on big wages. So maybe even put something in the contract that if he isn't doing it, you can send him back in January. So I really don't think this would be as big as a problem as some people would think. I think on a loan deal from August to May, this would be a very, very shrewd signing. and a type of signing that we have pulled off in the past, almost like a Van der Vaart, Chris, towards the end of the window, where we bring in a big player, a big name, and a position that we really need. And you could see Rashford scoring goals for Spurs, especially with this midfield, Chris. Tonali, Fernandes, and Madison. I think that's crying out for a striker with pace up front, and Rashford could really benefit from those types of players.
This is exactly what I was saying on Sunday's podcast. When you've got those players that can really put a fantastic ball in, you just need the strikers there now to finish. That's Yeah, well, we'll wait and see. 15 days left of the transfer window. Of course, there will be 2 more of these weekly Tottenham transfer news shows with Gareth and I. So, Gareth, look forward to talking to you next week about transfers yet again. But also look forward to seeing you on Wednesday talking about the Premier League, because, of course, the Premier League campaign for the 26-27 campaign starts on Friday. Of course, it starts for us Tottenham fans on Saturday away at Brentford. So we'll be talking about everything Premier League related on Wednesday. Gareth, thanks so much for joining me this evening. Always great chatting to you. Where can people find you on social media?
Yeah, you can find me on at their handle at Gareth Hotspurs. Of course, I'll be back here on Wednesday. And just in case anyone's going to miss the show on Wednesday, I'll give you a tip for the first week of the Premier League season. Coventry's going to beat Arsenal on the Friday night at the Emirates. There you go.
Well, go on. You might as well finish with a Tottenham prediction now as well. Only if it's a good one.
2-1 Spurs. Richarlison double.
Well, thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for listening. Always great to have you with us. And Gareth, thanks so much for your time. We will see you on Wednesday, and we will see you then. Come on, you Spurs.